Good afternoon. My name is Juraj Melichar and I'm working for Friends of the Earth CEPA. We are also part of the CE Bankwatch network. And it's my pleasure to also announce our speakers for this panel, Recovery Plans in Europe, How Can Slovakia Do Better? So I would like to welcome Markus Trilling from Climate Action Network Europe, Rafael Hanatu from E3G, and Daniel Pols from Friends of the Earth Netherlands will join us in a few minutes. Our discussion will be streamed online, and you can also ask questions via Slido or Facebook, so please use this opportunity. I would like also to apologize that we didn't provide gender balance of the panel, but we'll try our best next time. So Slovakia submitted the Recovery and Resilience Plan on time with 2.7 billion euros for green investments from the whole 6.5 billion euro allocations for Slovakia. The overall goal of the Slovak Recovery and Resilience Plan is to catch up the economic growth of other EU countries while meeting the environmental standards such as do no significant harm principle. The Slovak National Energy and Climate Plan and other documents would be revised in the coming future. The renewable energy and energy infrastructure will be supported with 230 million, sustainable transport with 705 million, decarbonization of industry with 368 million, and adaptation to climate change with 159 million euros. Renovation of households and public buildings has allocation 735 million euros. And in addition, various components include almost 2 billion for renovation of buildings, but also with the installation of fossil gas boilers, which is criticized mostly by environmental NGOs. The ministries acknowledge also in the morning session that the energy efficiency measures would condition the support for fossil gas boilers, but still keep it there. And I'm very glad that Rafael and Markus can give us also presentations which will show us where Slovak plan stands in the comparison and how we can improve in the finalization and implementation of it. So Rafael, can you please share your presentation, give us a little bit more detailed from the Green Recovery Tracker and tell us a little bit more.
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you very much, Juraj, for this invitation. And yes, I will talk about the recovery plan in Europe and how can Slovakia do better. And what I would like to do first is talk very quickly about the Recovery and Resilience Facility, our Green Recovery Tracker that we developed with E3G and Wuppertal Institute. That has an overview of the recovery and resilience plans in most member states, and then see how Slovakia is doing in comparison to other countries. So just really quickly, we know that we need to achieve the new EU 2030 climate targets, which is 55% of greenhouse gas reduction by 2030. And we know that this will require a significant increase in public and private investments. The Recovery and Resilience Facility has the potential to stimulate the economy. It's a stimulus package. It needs to kickstart the economy after the COVID, but also it has a role in shaping the investments landscape in the member states. Here you have the main things about it, but I think we know, most of you know that it's around 672 billion with a 37% climate target for the whole plan. At E3G and with the Wuppertal Institute, we developed this Green Recovery Tracker with a very simple approach. First of all, we tried to look at long-term economic recovery measures in EU member states, which means this year looking at recovery and resilience plans that we abbreviate RRPs. We tried to answer one question is, do recovery investments actually contribute to climate change mitigation and to a green recovery? We developed a methodology building on the RRF regulation and its annex, especially the do no harm principle guidance, but also the taxonomy. And we also assessed climate mitigation threshold and the methodology to count these used by the Commission. We also did that in close collaboration with national experts and based on our EU-wide methodology. I can be a bit more precise after that on the methodology if needed. These are the countries that we assessed. You don't see Italy because Italy was not assessed at the moment of this infographic, but these are roughly the country that we covered in this analysis. And here are the key findings EU-wide. So first of all, and I think that could be a surprise for a lot of you, is that most recovery plans do not most recovery plans miss the mark of the 37% climate spending target. So you only have Finland and Germany that are above this red dotted line, which is the 37% target. You have Belgium at 35%, barely missing it. But you also have other countries that really are not up to it. Slovenia, you don't see Italy there, that is, I think, at 16%, so very low. And of course, Slovakia, that interests us today, at 30%. So only two countries so far that are actually making the 37% mark according to our analysis. Second thing that is super important is that most measures that look green at first glance could possibly end up supporting fossil fuels in the future. That means that 25% of everything that we assessed and that will have a climate effect cannot really be assessed in terms of their positivity or negativity. Why is that? It's because the recovery and resilience plans do not really enter into details of the projects. They do not really say exactly what will be funded, but they have broader milestones and objectives. For example, you can see that in some cases you have a combination of positive investments in energy efficiency, but also investments in fossil gas boilers under the same heading, which means that you cannot really say whether this investment is positive or negative because it has a bit of both, and you are not really sure how much money goes in each category. Also, some investments happen with possible fossil fuels loopholes, and this is really the case, for example, for hydrogen infrastructure that could be used for pure hydrogen, but also or green hydrogen especially, but could also be used for blue hydrogen made out of fossil gas, or even worse, used for transportation of methane before it actually transport hydrogen. Last but not least, investments in building and industry projects that do not have climate standard are also very difficult to assess. What's the solution for that? One of the solution, and really one of the things that I'd like to insist on, is really that the European Commission will review the plans, but also there will be a moment of definition of milestones and targets for the member states to actually achieve with the Commission. And this is where we are really going to be able to see if a measure is actually positive or negative, and what milestones and what targets are contained in these measures. Third finding, an EU-wide finding that we have in our assessment, is that most plans are not aligned with the new 2030 climate targets. So we know that the Commission shows that we need regulatory measures, we need a fiscal policy, we need investments to actually achieve these 55% greenhouse gas reduction targets. And you can see the modeling with the baseline scenario here in blue. You can see that we need more efforts. And the recovery and resilience facility are extremely important to achieve that and to actually increase our ambition. But also member states are using what we call national energy and climate plans, NECPs, that were drafted in 2018 and 19, and that are not really up for purpose, are not fit for purpose, because they are not aligned with the 55, the new ambition. So this is also a big problem when we see the plans and when we see the global national strategy around decarbonization. last thing that I want to say also, you can see that most climate relevant spending in these countries, in the countries that we assessed, are not really targeting the energy sectors. We have investments in mostly in buildings and mobility. Some countries also invest heavily in industry, and then energy most of the time is the smallest amount of investments in the plan. But what about Slovakia? And I think this is really important to see how Slovakia fares compared to others. So I know that now there were extra allocation for Slovakia, so it's not 6 billion 150 million, it's 6 billion 0.5. But let's stick with this assessment, because I think it's fairly reflecting what is going on in Slovakia. And you can see that in terms of very negative or negative investment that we could actually identify, you have 100 million for negative investment, and 100 million for very negative ones. So it's not that much compared to overall, but it's still a pretty big amount. You can see that there is also 2.9 billion euros in the plan that will likely have no significant climate effect. So not really able to say if it's positive or negative, probably no effect. And then we have 2.3 billion which are deemed positive, and around just below a billion that will also be very positive in terms of investments, which gives us a green spending share for Slovakia of 30%, which is okay, but still missing the mark of the 37% green spending for the Recovery and Resilience Facility. In terms of good things and bad things, one good thing that happened is actually that the EU guidance encouraged ministries to have support for climate-related measure, increase a bit their ambition in the plan, and also make sure that the Environment Ministry will be overseeing implementation of measures on the industry decarbonization and renovation wave for renovation of family houses. So we can see that there were improvements in the plan. This was a long process that started for Slovakia in, I think, July of 2020. And the result and the back and forth with the Commission has had positive effects. However, a very bad thing that happens in the plan is the support for fossil gas boilers. So you, as I said, you have measures for energy efficiency that are positive, but also that include 50 million euros of investments into fossil gas boilers, even though cleaner solutions exist, and even though the International Energy Agency showed it last month, we need to phase out fossil gas boilers by 2025. So no new fossil gas boilers by 2025, according to the International Energy Agency, if we want to be net zero in 2050. So given the fact that gas boilers have a relatively long life utilization, it's really possibly stranded assets that we're investing in. And also the problem is that this is an expensive measure. This measure, I know, is deemed to address energy poverty, but actually this is really not the cheapest way to heat a home. And especially in the future, if we need to decarbonize heavily fossil gas and we need to electrify, then all of these investments will be lost and the bill for the consumer has to increase. So this is really not a positive measure, neither for energy poverty nor for climate mitigation. If we go a bit more in detail, you can see that there are positive investments in the development of renewable energy generation, also positive investments in sustainable transport, decarbonization of industry, and renovation of building. However, the support for fossil gas boilers and the support for infrastructure for alternative fuels and issues around hydrogen also show that you have negative impacts and negative investments that are coming also in Slovakia. So that leaves us with the question, how can Slovakia do better? This was the guiding question. In terms of process, we know that we expect the first assessment of the European Commission this month in June. And we know that the indicator of successful assessment would be to have an effective scrutiny of the climate tagging, the climate earmarking in the plans, and the do no significant harm. So really a good assessment of what is harmful in the plan or not. But the second thing, and probably the most important, is really the milestones and targets that need to be aligned with the green transition, and especially the ones that are vaguely defined. And you saw that 25% of climate-related investments is not well defined enough so that we can assess it and that we can assess if it's positive or not. So defining milestones, defining targets will be extremely important to actually invest and to actually have a real waterproof framework to invest in green solutions. Of course, the Recovery and Resilience Facility is also about reforms. So focusing on investments and reforms is also the key to have a successful recovery. We know that there will be, European institutions will still be working on the plans, and then ultimately the Council will approve that. But if we can take a step back and just think about how can Slovakia do better in the next decade, because we have a crucial decade to actually decarbonize. First of all, the amount of money available for the clean energy transition in the EU overall is unprecedented. We have over 350 billion euros earmarked only for the green energy transition, between the Recovery and Resilience Facility and the 37% objective and the EU budget that is also has a 25% climate mainstreaming objective. So we have 350 billion only for that. But the real challenge is how member states will be able to absorb this funding in a just and transformative way. And for this, we really need a clear decarbonization strategy that really enables the delivery of the 2030 objective. And I just want to show you this graph on the right that shows that we need to decrease our use of natural gas energy consumption by 32% by 2030 and by 96% by 2050. So we need to decrease our use of gas. We need to do a lot of other things, but I'm just focusing a bit on gas for this. So what does that mean? That means that we need to have a real decarbonization strategy and decarbonization pathways. And at the moment, most national energy and climate plans, and especially the Slovak one, and also the national long-term strategy, are not really fit for purpose. They are not really up to the task, and we need to increase their ambition. We need to have plans that are enabling us to have a clear view on what is the strategy. In that respect, Slovakia should review its plan, and this is also an opportunity to become a trailblazer in the CE region, to really show that this is possible and that investments in the CE region can really lead to a very ambitious climate objectives. With that, I would just like to thank you, and very happy to take any question that you have on this presentation.
Thank you very much, Raphael, for the comprehensive presentation. I will ask Markus now to give us also his presentation, and then we go more deeper into the discussion after having both and having a even broader picture.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Juraj. You see, I'm still struggling with my IT. Here we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Markus Trilling, my name. I'm with Climate Action Network Europe, a network of environmental NGOs. I'm very happy to be here today to give a little bit alternative perspectives of what is possible, how money, recovery funding can be spent really to catalyze the transition boldly enough, fastly enough, as it is urgently needed. Just a remark, I haven't copy-pasted the arguments from Raphael. Obviously, you will see that we are coming to the same conclusions. So thanks again, Raphael, for preparing the ground here. What is very clear, and again, this came up in Raphael's presentation, we have to increase the climate ambition. We have to reduce emissions drastically. What you see here is the trajectories of the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. We know the EU is now debating how to get to minus 55%. in Can Europe, we think a 65% reduction for Europe is needed to be compatible with the objective of the Paris Agreement to limit global warming to 1.5%. And what you see here as well, that in those 10 years or 9 years is exactly the time, the period when the EU budget will be spent. This is the recovery funding, but you know as well, there are other funds which are of crucial importance for Slovakia. And for investors and for infrastructure investments, 2030 is tomorrow. There is no doubt, every investment decision you're making today will shape the structure of your economy in 2030. This is why it is so crucially important that we are anticipating what is coming, that we really think forward where we want to go. 2030 as the very close milestones, but of course with a goal that we are achieving climate neutrality, each and every place in the world and in Europe particularly early. So this is the challenge. From the EU side, as well Raphael pointed out, unprecedented amount of subsidies will be flowing to the EU member states. So here you see all EU budget funds which are relevant for the ecological transition. This is, of course, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, dark orange, but as well, when you look into the case for Slovakia, structural funds are not less important. And you know as well that the decision-making on structural funds is happening as well. Common agricultural funds, just transition fund. So again, I think we have to look as well at the whole pot of money coming from the EU, as well with the purpose of catalyzing the green transition. Okay, you see here when you took this all together, all EU budget funds for Slovakia, in 7 years for the entire MFF, 4 years for the recovery fund, 25 billion. You see other countries getting much more. So how much is this 25 billion for Slovakia? And here you see if all the money would be spent in 1 year, and then you compare it, how big is this compared to the GDP of a country? And here we see that it is 25% of Slovakia's GDP. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the big bang. If you ask your finance minister what he thinks about getting 25% from outside to spend on infrastructure, on everything which is purpose, this is the finance minister's paradise. And that with this comes in responsibility, to make this very clear. And ladies and gentlemen, we are on 1% global warming. We're in the 6th mass extinction of wildlife. A business as usual is simply not an option if we really want to prevent an upheaval of society unprecedented in modern mankind. So again, what I'm saying, this is not just any spending plan. This is really the opportunities in our hand to reshape the economies. And what we are making out of it in the next years is fundamentally crucial. Together with our members, including Bankwatch, including E3G, including as well at CEPA, we have collected examples of what member states have put into their spending plans. We did this until April. We've been looking into the recovery and resilience plans. We have been looking into operational programs of the regional policy, which is regional development, cohesion fund, just transition fund, and modernization fund. We were thinking of like to structure them and thinking of what is really, in our view, helpful and important to catalyze the transition, the decarbonization of all sectors. And of course, we have been looking at measures where we think, oh, this is a lost opportunity, or as well simply harmful to the environment and blocking the transition. And you see here in the cash award, so we have this put out for a little bit vote. You can always look at it. What we saw, and I will come later to this, there is a lot of good examples which show that countries, regions know the challenge, know what to do, how to get the just transition going, how to support bottom-up approaches, how to get into the different sectors to do the investments which trigger the change. We have as well seen a lot of measures where we think this is just like the low-hanging fruit is there and you don't pick it up. Why not? This is in transport, this is for renewables, this is for energy efficiency in buildings. And I think the Damocles thought about it. Everything this, when it comes to recovery, has been done behind closed doors, which did not help improve the quality of the plans. And then last but not least as well, a couple of number of projects where we just simply saying this is not what modern forward-looking investment policy looks like. This is support for fossil fuels blind away. This is as well destruction of nature. So really something which must have an end. This now. What I want to show you now, the results from our little cash awards exercise. Again, to give you a flavor of what member states can do if they want. Bear with me a second. This is to increase the tension.
I know. Als jij...
It worked during our rehearsal, so maybe this was the problem. I will reload, excuse me. Good. Sorry to say, Slovakia was not among the winners of the good EU cash awards. I think Raphael explained a little bit why was this the case. Again, I want to show you, well, come back to those good examples and to work out a little bit the structural political thinking behind it. And here you see only the recovery plans examples. So in Italy, right, again, the question of what are we doing with transport? The electrification of transport definitely is the talk of the town, but we have to look as well in even more alternative transport modes. Cycling tracks, for example, are very prominent in the Italian plan. Spain has a particular issue with the rural areas, right, where the metropolitan areas and the gap between those areas and the rural areas are really a problem. And here we as well that a particular focus has been given to help those areas in their ecological transition. When it comes to bottom-up approaches, energy communities, prosumer movements, really bold in the last decade. And here we see as well, I dare to say in the first time, for the first time, dedicated support for exactly those cooperatives, for energy communities, for combined measures for renewable and energy efficiency in private buildings. This is very important. Then again, last but not least, energy efficiency in housing. the Wallonians won the gold medal because they have a very, very smart scheme to renovate social housing and public buildings. As well, in Poland, energy efficiency in buildings is going to be approved. And then again, Spain, where they're looking into the sustainable transformation of cities and municipalities, again, with a long-term integrated approach to make the maximum out of energy efficiency in building. I think what I want to hear show you everything what we are discussing about what is needed on bottom-up approaches, on renewable energy, on energy efficiency. Some countries do it. And I think every government must have an answer why they don't doing it as well. So again, given that the money is there, the technology is there, the good examples is there, what we think is the lessons learned from those 50 examples, from looking into the spending plans of 16 countries. And here's again, I haven't sneaked into Rafael's presentation, but it's very clear. You need to have strategic foresight. You know, we will have a new 2030 target with has higher ambition, and this has to be materialized in national energy and climate plans. But the investment thinking, how to achieve those higher targets, they have to happen now. We need to anticipate that more higher targets, more obligations will come. And this has to be put into the spending plans today, to not be called on the wrong foot in 2 years, 3 years, when those binding targets might come. Then another point, the recovery plan is about investments, but it is as well about reforms. And when you hear the European Commission, they are having the technical support instrument where they say, we help you to bring your standards, the legislative framework, rules, to put this into place that you can increase the ambition, that you have the capacity to implement those projects. This needs to be done. The support is there technically and as well financially. And then last but not least, I think we have to be very honest about the reality of living, particularly in some areas. When I'm doing a major investment now in buildings renovation, and systematically I'm putting there technology, a fossil fuel technology into it, gas. I make the decision today, it will be operational in 5-6 years. Be honest, how long will this burn before you turn it down? It will be 20 years, it will be 30 years, not even longer. So gas as a transition, economically, practically, is an illusion. Don't do it. Go to the already available, no doubt, more complicated solutions, but otherwise the progress we need will be hampered. Again, I think this was the three conclusions from my side, and now would give back the floor to Juraj to steer our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Markus, for the presentation and for the another food for thought. I would like to also ask Donald Pauls to follow up on the last Markus's recommendation regarding also the fossil gas. So we quite often hear that the Netherlands has the relatively highest fossil gas infrastructure in the European Union, and Slovakia is the second one. But we also heard that Netherlands is one of the leading countries in phasing out natural gas. So Slovakia is planning support from the recovery and resilience plan on fossil gas boilers. There is planned LNG terminal in Bratislava, and other development of the infrastructure is being discussed. Can you give us some views or insights from Netherlands and maybe what we can learn from your example?
Thank you very much, and for the opportunity to not only participate in the discussion, but also to have the opportunity to see the beautiful and informative presentations by the previous two speakers. Yes, indeed, the Netherlands has decided to phase out gas in the built environment totally. In the industry, it will be still be used, although even there's a discussion to phase it out. And what you see is that while the motive was not purely a climate motive, a lot of our gas, if not the majority of our gas, was previously locally sourced. One of our provinces was known when it was discovered as the biggest gas discovery ever. But exploration or using that gas created a lot of minor earthquakes, although the population of the province would not see it as minor because it destabilized their houses substantively. So that was, together with the climate, a major motive to stop with gas. It's being proven a bit more difficult than expected. So what you see is that the discussion is also now to not phase out gas geysers fully, but to invest in hybrid solutions in which you use electricity and a bit of gas when you have a peak demand. And another discussion that is now being very prominent in the Netherlands is a variation, you could say, on the just transition. For the discussion, I will differentiate between the just transition that is often seen as related to jobs and the equitable transition, which is more related to the distribution of costs and benefits. And in the household sector, that is very clear. In the Netherlands, 2/3 of subsidies for the transition, for the energy transition, goes towards higher income people, while lower income people pay 4 to 5 times more energy tax that is then used to subsidize the energy transition as a share of their total income. That has resulted in a broad societal debate on how to ensure that costs and benefits of the transition, or the short-term costs and benefits, and the non-climate costs and benefits are more equitably shared in society.
Thank you very much, Donald. And that you also touched upon the very important issue of connecting the environmental and social issues together. And I would like to give also a question to others related to the present and things like as the energy efficiency first principle we see is also connected in the Slovak component with the also the fossil gas boilers directly in the component, like the fossil gas boilers will be conditioned with this. How we can ride the renovation wave, as Marcus pointed out, what would be crucial for reforms and implementation there, and maybe even how to support or actually get the support from the recovery and resilience facility to the lower income households, not only to the higher income households, because what we see is also that the people who are burning various fuels probably won't switch to fossil gas because of the price of the fuels and so on. So your recommendations and views on this, please.
Maybe I can, I'll start briefly and then leave the floor to Marcus. Yeah, I just want to highlight that energy efficiency and addressing energy poverty are two things that will go hand in hand, and that will be crucial for the Fit for 55 package that is coming, and the gas package also in December. So in this recovery aspect that we're talking about today, and with Slovakia, I think we need to make sure that the energy efficiency, so applying the energy efficiency first principle, especially for buildings, really means before retrofitting and before going with gas boilers and really worrying about putting a new fossil fuel into the buildings, we really before that need to really assess the building itself and making sure that it's energy efficient before fitting anything else. And this will be extremely important because in the future, we know that any investment now in fossil fuel technology will need to be phased out very soon. So if you have an investment that is not bankable, you can't have it profitable over 30 years, then it's not profitable. If it's not profitable, then someone will have to pay the bill, be it the company or the consumers. We know that most of the time companies can be bailed out and consumers cannot. So this is really, to me, the link with energy poverty, and the fact that actually right now electrification is a better deal. If you take even a medium-term scope, you really see that electrification and avoiding gas, especially in heating, is very important.
If I may add, I mentioned at the beginning, the recovery fund is one subsidy, but again, regional policy and the Just Transition Fund is even bigger. Right? And here as well, the main scope and the objectives, at least what comes from the EU, is the diversification of the economy in certain sectors which are have a heavier burden on themselves due to historical developments, of course. Right? So I think, again, when it comes to the question how to finance the just transition, in the economic sphere, they're definitely, again, the instrumentarium, the objectives are there. You just have to take this extra step and burden and develop alternative economic ecosystems, to invest in the skills, into new, maybe regional economic structures. So this is when it comes to the business. And then when it comes to consumers or the citizens, and Donald mentioned it, we see that many as well economic structures, for example, fossil fuel subsidies or taxation, right, benefits the better off members of society very often, right? So we have to think as well of a tax reform, a fossil fuel subsidies reform, which in a way takes away those privileges on one hand. On the other hand, as well, we know fossil fuels do not internalize the damage. This gives a good reason to subsidize renewables, which is happening in Europe. And here as well, why should not be there then as well a scheme which gives more support to renewable electricity for those who are less well off. So I think as well from the fiscal policy side, there are as well good examples how to buffer the transition and the shift of structures. I'm not saying the burden, because in the end we have to see what costs more, action or non-action, right? But again, to the disruption of structures, that this can be buffered socially fair and just. This is a must, and this is possible.
Mm-hmm. And we often heard that, for example, heat pumps or solar system are more expensive than the fossil gas boilers. And the ministries even this morning mentioned that they would be able to support less households with the heat pumps or other renewable technologies. But maybe in the long term, the comparison is different. Do you have any views on this, or the elements and recommendations for long-term period?
If you allow me, like we all know, the capital expenditure, the upfront cost is of renewables and energy efficiency is high. or the operational expenditure, the running cost is low. But that if there's no government support, this characteristic of the transition results in it being more benefits accruing to higher income, because they have more financial flexibility and can therefore cover the cost of upfront or capital expenditure. And the question is then, in the northern, say in the Netherlands, the primary climate instruments were subsidies, market-based subsidies based on a specific interpretation of the S-curve for innovators, frontrunners, and etc. So the argument was, if you subsidize people to invest in, for example, solar PV or electric boilers or electric cars for that matter, that will bring a sort of a flywheel effect, which will then result in renewable technologies getting less expensive and therefore accessible to everybody. But this mindset, this philosophy, results in people with a higher income being subsidized to buy technology that will result in them saving costs through saving energy costs, which is probably correct in an S-curve sense for very early on if you introduce new technologies. But we are not that early on anymore. Climate policy is now regular policy that is supported broadly throughout Europe. So you should consider, in my view, a different approach. An approach that, in my view, should focus and emphasize investments in lower income and lower middle income communities, which in most countries, in any case in the Netherlands, half of the population do not have any financial resources at the end of the month. They're not poor. It's a rich country. Just to be clear, this is I'm not saying this is a developing country and that people are living on the streets, but still at the end of the month, half of the population in the Netherlands does not have any financial flexibility. They have just enough salary to cover their cost for a month. And I guess in many other countries, it's even worse, especially after the corona. So I would argue that as an environmental movement, we should lobby for prioritization of lower income groups. And we just, together with the labor union and a number of other organizations, launched a climate plan that focuses on lower income and lower middle income groups, in which we have 4 main elements. The first is launching 1,000 in the Netherlands, of course, that is with 17 million people. It's 1,000 sounds a bit different than maybe some other countries. 1,000 electric vehicle hubs, where, especially based in lower income communities and areas, where people can do car sharing with electric vehicles financed by the government. So everybody gets access to shared electric vehicles, electric bicycles, public transport, etc. So there are sort of nodes bringing people together. The second is an insulation plan for 500,000 houses in the Netherlands, of which 160,000 are private homes, because a lot of people cannot cover they have their own house, but they still can only just cover the cost. So 500,000 houses, focusing on lower income houses with that are badly insulated, so the lowest grade of insulation in the Netherlands, and therefore focusing on these, not a general subsidy, but a focused subsidy. And the subsidy form is inspired by, in the UK, the green voucher system. It's not it's a grant that you get to insulate your home. specifically focusing on lower income. The third is the physical greening of poor neighborhoods. As you probably know, in most countries, if not all, poorer neighborhoods are also less green. They have less trees. So we want to plant 17 million trees in the Netherlands with a focus on poorer neighborhoods. And the last is something that is absolutely underestimated in the Netherlands. I'm not sure if it's the same in other countries. Is the biggest bottleneck in the Netherlands will be skilled people to implement the transition. Money is not the problem. There's enough, but the moment that you can start making money, there will be investors that are prepared to invest. Technology is not the problem. We've just discussed there's different types of technology. Of course, there are still, some of them are in development, but we can manage the transition with the current technology. But who is going to insulate the houses? Who's going to put up all of the solar PV on the houses? Who are going to build and roll out windmills? In the Netherlands, we don't have those people. In some other, I understand it's a bit of a luxury problem. In other countries, it will be a bit different. But these people need to be trained and be available to manage that transition. So our fourth point is a large-scale schooling plan in which we will train people to implement the transition. And especially in the Netherlands, it's interesting because, like I said, we have more or less the availability of jobs is a problem. So where do we want to get those people from? We want to extract them from the fossil fuel industry and retrain them to be available for the green revolution.
Thank you very much, Donald, for these four recommendations, which are very cross-dimensional and showing very inspirational pathways as well. We have last 8 minutes and 3 questions still not answered from the Slido. I would like to ask, what is your opinion about the projects like mechanical MRBT projects, mechanical recovery and biological treatment and storage for solar, wind and energy, and also good practice of decarbonization of industry projects. I'm not quite sure who would like to respond to this rather circular economy question and storage for solar and wind energy. I can just briefly reflect that only construction waste is in the Slovak recovery and resilience plan and no other circular measures. There will be rather finance from the European structural investment funds. And is there any NGO or which works on a good practice on decarbonization of industry, which you know from the EU level or other levels, other countries?
Just to respond on that, on the MRBT, I'm not going to respond anything because this is not my expertise, so I don't want to say anything stupid. But on the decarbonization of industry, I think there are a lot of good NGOs working on that. I know E3G also is working on how to decarbonize industry itself. I just want to make a point on that. If we talk about good practices there, I think we should really focus the whole discussion around gas decarbonization should focus also on industry and how to abate sector. And this is, I think, the next big discussion that we'll have at EU level, with the ETS review that will come in July. The idea that we could extend it to building and transport, but also the ETS in general, is the key decarbonization tool especially for industry. But first of all, it's not going to bring everything that we need. It's not a magical tool. We also need accompanying policies and we need regulation around it because otherwise it's not a silver bullet like we say in Brussels. But the second thing is that one of the most key topics that we talk about is hybrid hydrogen. And it's related to what we were saying before, because some people talk about hydrogen in heating, blending hydrogen, all that stuff. We really think as S3G that if we want to use hydrogen efficiently, we need to concentrate it on end-use sectors that are very difficult to decarbonize otherwise with other technologies or are impossible to electrify. And this is one of the key to decarbonize industry, is really to use hydrogen, green hydrogen made from renewable sources, additional renewable sources, to address this sector, and not sprinkle hydrogen everywhere and not having a real added value there. So that was just my point on industry.
Maybe just a small, it seems as if there's in industry, there can be a competition between the vested interests in government and business that prefer CCS, and those of us like E3G, and including myself, that are convinced that hydrogen is the future for the difficult to decarbonize sectors. And this can become a very hard conflict, because CCS has a strong support from the vested interests, but it could create a new form of stranded assets, in the sense that if you've invested billions literally in CCS in the industry, there's no driver for change towards hydrogen anymore.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And the last question was about what you say that the value-added tax for energy efficiency support program is going to be non-eligible costs. That means additional costs for citizens. And in Latvia, also in Czechia, the VAT for energy efficiency is higher than for heating. Is it not really an energy efficiency first principle in practice? How do you see this? I think in Slovakia we also have a tax reduction on the energy efficiency programs. And I see that we are slowly moving towards the end, and I would like to thank you for the presentations and for the discussion. And I think we can also share the presentations later on if people would be interested. And I would like to thank Markus Trilling, Rafael Hanotu, and Donald Polz for participation, and I hope to see you some other time on other events as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Rai. Thank you very much.